right. It seems we have accumulated several attendees, so I am going to go ahead and get us started. Good morning or good afternoon, depending on where you are located, and welcome to this morning's webinar, Reflections on Resilience, a special briefing on CMEP's January 2024 Executive Leaders Trip to the Middle East. We have some great speakers with us today. Reverend Dr. Mae Elise Cannon will also be joining us shortly. She's coming straight from another engagement, but we will go ahead and get started here in just a moment. If you don't know me, my name is Destiny Magnet. I'm the Programs and Outreach Manager here at Churches for Middle East Peace, and I'm grateful to have the opportunity to help facilitate today's webinar. The way that our run of show will go is we'll hear in turn from each of our panelists, beginning with Her Excellency Vicki Downey, moving to Tamar Haddad, and then finally with Reverend Dr. Cannon. And after that, we will open the floor to you for your questions. As you have questions, feel free to put them in the Q&A feature or in the chat, and we'll be watching and get to those in the second half of the webinar. So without further ado, I want to go ahead and introduce our speakers. So our first speaker, Her Excellency Vicki Downey, is the first woman to head the Holy Sepulchre Order in the Eastern Lieutenancy. As lieutenant, she is involved in directing critical support to the institutional activities of the Latin Patriarchate of Jerusalem, including pastoral care, maintenance of clergy, support of the seminary, construction and maintenance of parish churches and school buildings, and subsidy of school operations, among many others. As you can see, she wears many hats. Under her guidance, the Eastern Lieutenancy continues to advocate for the preservation of holy places and the Christian presence in the Holy Land through its financial support and pilgrimages. Our second speaker, Tamar Haddad, is the And Still We Rise Women's Empowerment Coordinator for us here at Churches for Middle East Peace, and she is based in Jerusalem. Tamar was hugely impacted by her involvement in many leadership programs like MEPI, Student Leaders Program, International Women Leaders, and the Clinton Global Initiative. Tamar previously served as the project manager for gender justice at the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Jordan and the Holy Land, and currently Tamar also panels at the UN Commission on the Status of Women and volunteers as a regional coordinator at the Lutheran World Federation, and I'll add she is also a published author. And then finally, the Reverend Dr. Mae Elise Cannon, as many of you know, is of course the Executive Director of Churches for Middle East Peace and an ordained pastor in the Evangelical Covenant Church. Reverend Dr. Cannon holds an MDiv from North Park Theological Seminary and 2 doctorates, the first in American history and the second in spiritual formation. And she has been published in many formats, including news outlets, and is the author of several books, including the award-winning Social Justice Handbook, Small Steps for a Better World, and the editor of A Land Full of God. And we, in this time and all times, are very, very grateful for her leadership. So with those brief introductions out of the way, let's get into the bulk of this webinar. And Your Excellency, if you'd like to start us off, telling us a little about your reflections on this really powerful trip this January.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much, Destiny. And just a little update on on myself. I am now a Lieutenant of Honor of the Equestrian Order of the Holy Sepulchre of Jerusalem. And my main concerns now are in Palestine. And I am working very closely with the Holy Child Program because they need all the help they can get, as all of our wonderful projects over in the Holy Land do. I was honored to be invited by Reverend Mae to join the group this January. It was a planned trip, many months in the making. We did not realize it would become a ceasefire trip, a peace mission of some ways. It was set up many months ago just to see different projects, meet with different people, and see what we could do as independent as people here in the United States, church leaders in the United States, what we could do to help those that really can't help themselves. What it turned into was far more than we thought, because it was necessary for us to be there, necessary for several reasons. The main one being is that we needed to let our brothers and sisters in the Holy Land know that we hadn't forgotten them, we were still with them, and we were still praying for them. I was particularly taken back by my airport experience, and this was it was my 24th time going to the Holy Land in the past 10 years or so, and so I've had many experiences. I'm sure many of you who've traveled internationally since 9/11 have also had the heightened security, none more so than when flying into Tel Aviv. I had several go round with the people checking me in, making sure who I was, what I was doing, why I was going, weren't really listening to the fact that I just wanted to go and pray with our church leaders of all denominations over in Israel, Palestine, Jordan, Lebanon, and we were going to be going to Iraq, of course, which we had to cancel during the trip. And finally, on the fourth person that came to me, he said, "Mom, there is a war going on over there," as if we couldn't know over in America that there was actually a war going on. So it was a bit of a surprise to our check-in team that people would want to be going over to Israel at that point, because of course that's the only flight we could get into, was flying in to Tel Aviv. So we landed. I was met by my team that usually pick me up, to tears of happiness to see that people still were remembering them. That was very emotive for me. The same driver that picks me up from the airport 3 or 4 times a year, literally tearful and hugging me, which he'd never done before, which we will do all the time now, to say thank you that we are going to be there. So just the normal people that are used to seeing people like you and I traveling to the Holy Land, really, really touched by the fact that we were braving the dangers, which of course there were some dangers. We were very looked after. We were well looked after, and we were listening to all of our people on the ground, so we knew we were safe where we were. The second part that really struck me initially in those first few days was how empty Jerusalem was. For those who have traveled to the Holy Land, you know that it's almost like walking down a high street at Christmas, that you can't go through, you can't get through, you can't go into the Church of the Holy Sepulchre without having to bustle your way through. Even through those lovely streets of Jerusalem, they were absolutely empty. And so much so that all of those shops on the walks around, the few little shops that were open, majority of them were closed. I would say probably less than 3% of the stores were open. The shopkeepers would come running out, wanting to talk to us, not even trying to sell us anything, just wanted to talk to us and just get some human interaction that was really important to them. So those are the two things that really struck me when we first arrived, the difference that just a few short months had made. I was with a group of 56 pilgrims. It was my last one as the order of the Equestrian Order's Eastern Lieutenancy leader before I became the Lieutenant of Honor. And we had 56 pilgrims with us literally a week before the trouble started. So the difference in just those few short months was rather stark. On the meetings that we had, and we were very fortunate that Churches for Middle East Peace had reached out to so many people, and so many people wanted to meet with us. We met with church leaders, we met with politicians, we met with American government officials and local government officials, and local civic leaders as well. And we were very fortunate. I think one of my colleagues told us last week that within the first 5 days, we had 23 meetings or around those. I think I missed 2 of them because I had spent some time with the nuncio over there. But the first 4 or 5 days, there were 5-6 meetings a day. And that was a great testimony to the inclusiveness of the trip. Everybody wanted to meet with us, and we wanted to meet with many, many people and to get everybody else's perspective of what was going on. And the overwhelming feeling that we got from people from all walks of life was that of frustration that the message wasn't getting out, frustration that left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing, even on the ground. Frustration that they felt left behind. And that was all walks of life. So we were very glad to be the intermediaries, almost the interlocutors, while we were meeting with different people, to be able to share not only their stories, our stories, but stories of those people within the same community that weren't getting out. And that was one of my biggest takeaways, and one of my biggest thanks to Churches Middle East Peace, to be able to share the stories of all the individual groups that we were with other groups, and for everybody to realize that we were all on the same page. Since I've been back, I've been honored to speak to many people, but one of the most emotive speaking engagements I had was to my son's high school. It is a Jesuit high school in Fordham. It's Fordham Prep, and they are an amazing group of young men. His classmates, his freshman classmates, knew that we were going, and they prayed for us every day, and they prayed for those in the Holy Land affected by this dreadful war. And since we've been back, they have been very, very much engaged, continuing to pray for their sister and brother schools over in Palestine in particular, and also embarking on the Lenten walks. I'm sure that Reverend May will be telling you more about those going forward. But the young men that we met with are now more committed than ever to try and help with a ceasefire situation. And that is the way, in my opinion, that is the way we're going to get things done. It's going to be the youth, the education of the youth on this side of the Atlantic, in the Holy Land, and throughout the world. And once we get the youth involved, that would mean that we will have a brighter future. Thank you so much, Destiny.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency, for those great reflections, and how beautiful and powerful to be able to share with the youth. I think that's so important now more than ever. So thank you for those reflections. And if anyone has questions for Her Excellency Vicki Downey, please feel free to put those in the Q&A for the latter half of the webinar. And with that, I will give the virtual mic over to Tamar Haddad.
Thank you, Destiny. So I was actually part of the committee that planned for all the meetings that we had when the US delegation came to the Holy Land. So I was here the whole time, and I was asked to help with certain meetings. And I was surprised that CMEP still chose to come with everything that was happening here. You know, they heard a lot of things like it's not safe, which it wasn't really. And, you know, the risk of traveling and flying, even through, some had to go through Israeli airlines. So the trouble of coming here, and yet they still made it happen. And we met with a lot of, and I wasn't part of the Jordan or Lebanon portion, but I was part of the Israel-Palestine portion. And I've talked to a lot of HOCs with the delegation. We met with a lot of partners, and even the president of Palestine, Mahmoud Abbas, was just happy to see groups like Churches for Middle East Peace be in the Holy Land, just to share the Palestinian voice outside of Palestine. And I remember Bishop Shomali from the Latin Patriarch here being so happy about the CMEP delegation just doing this trip, because we haven't had tourists or groups ever since October the 7th. And as Her Excellency already mentioned, just walking through the old city is just very empty. Even at the Church of Nativity or in that square outside of it, everything was empty. Shops are closed. And yeah, we haven't been having a lot of people come to the Holy Land at all ever since October the 7th. But one of the things that really had an influence on me, well, I'd say two things. I'll start with the conversations that we had with certain organizations here about, for example, like Fadwa Barghouti, who is the wife of Marwan Barghouti, who leads a very two-state solution movement. And I personally wasn't a believer of a two-state solution, but just talking to them made me feel like, okay, there is hope. There are some people who want to have that peace and just like having two people live in the same land. But then the other thing that really had an effect on me was, and Your Excellency, you weren't with us on that day, but it was when we went to the villages. We had a whole day just dedicated to going to villages and near Ramallah and then to Nablus, and we had to spend a whole day in the car, actually 2 days. But just I was hearing every day about how these villages are locked, and I would get updates every day and I would share them for the briefings at least once a week. But just not being able to enter those villages because every entrance, literally, we would go all around the whole of Ramallah city. So instead of taking 5 minutes to enter, you'd had to take another route and do just a whole big round about the whole area, which would take us 2 extra hours. Imagine, like from 5 minutes to 2 hours to get to the other entry, and then having the other entry also closed. We couldn't enter until people from the villages would come and show us the exact route, which took us like honestly just half an hour, even an hour, just trying to coordinate where to meet them. So that was really, really hard because I would hear about it and I would see about it in the news, but then just having to experience it was something else. And also on that same day, we had an um, Israeli military truck come follow us because we were touring all around the village and they were confused. Like the military truck was very confused. They were like, "What are you doing here?" And then, of course, they stopped us. They saw foreigners in the car. I had to hide my face personally because, like, I don't want to show a Palestinian with them. We also had Hassan al-Tayyib with us, who also looked very Palestinian, even though he's an American citizen. But we kind of hid in the back, and um, the truck thought that the car, like we in the car, were in danger because like they were Americans in the car, and why are they in an Arab area? So they made us follow them, um, so that they help us find the route to enter one of the villages. And for me, like as a Palestinian, that was very, very scary. Because I've never done that before. And they even shared their number saying, if it feels dangerous for you, just call this number. And it's a funny story, but Reverend Dr. May ended up talking to them, and we had a wonderful time at that village. We talked to, it was Aboud, by the way, and we talked and had a wonderful day with the pastor there, the priest actually. And she told him by the end of her time, "Hey, just wanted to let you know it was a good time, and I hope peace one day happens where you're both able to talk to each other." So that was very memorable for me. And I think a lesson I learned from this whole delegation was that how important it is for groups like CMEP and other Christian organizations to keep coming to the Holy Land, because it's honestly like really, really hard without having those groups come with us. And just seeing all these historical and Christian places empty with no people has been really hard for many Palestinians. So, and Her Excellency already mentioned when these people just wanted to come and talk to them because we haven't been seeing a lot of people even around these areas. I'd say that now I feel like there are more people coming in, so it's definitely better. But just having that opportunity where Palestinians are able to just talk about what they're going through, I think is very, very powerful. And but I also believe in the power of having these groups come in the Holy Land and just hear the stories from locals here. It if you never come, I think it's very, very hard for people to grasp what is actually happening. And
Great. Are you all finished, Tamar? Sorry, you cut out for just a second.
sorry, I was done. I should have just
Okay, great.
explained.
No, and I would love very quickly on this thread of going to the Holy Land. I wonder, Tamar, if you could say just a word about the opportunity to travel for And Still We Rise and kind of what that means and what it's looking like, just very quickly on that topic.
So, I'm not sure how familiar you are with the women empowerment program that we have at CMEP. It's called And Still We Rise. Now, the first time that this program happened was back in 2018, but it was in DC, and we had a lot of Palestinian women attend the summit in DC. Because of COVID, we never had the chance to actually make it happen ever since. And this is the first time that we're doing it outside of the US. So we decided to bring the summit to the Holy Land. It will be happening this November from the 15th to the 17th of November in Jericho. And we're having Palestinian women interact with American women. So if you are interested, basically American women, and so the first day is actually men are able to join, but only for the first day, and then they'll have their own educational program and civic engagement program. But then the summit itself focuses on healing women, how they can have peace in their homes, just having a spiritual element to it as well. We're trying to bring in influential leaders like Hanan Sharawi, maybe Ramzi Khouri, just people who have political influence and not just religious. And then we'd also like to end the summit with a human rights element and activism, how these women can be helping each other, both from like we're giving them the space to hear other narratives. So like for American women to hear the Palestinian voice and for Palestinian women to hear the American voice, it would be a great like integrational environment where women are able to hear their experiences, which can be very different, but it's part of why we're doing it. So if you are interested, you can reach out to me directly or our trips coordinator, Anna, or just to anyone in CMEP. We are still, we just opened the registration actually for the local women, and there is a high demand. So I think first come, first serve because the rooms are limited. But if you are interested, just let us know and you can come in with a group. Individual registration for Americans is still not open, but it should open before our advocacy summit in April. But I think it's a great opportunity. And if it works out, we're thinking of expanding. So we're doing it here for the first time, but maybe we can do it in Egypt and Jordan and Lebanon in the future.
Destiny, may I just make a quick point on that? Because I know that many people have asked how safe it is to travel, when it's going to be safe to travel, when we'll be able to get back into the pilgrimage way of life, which of course, as everybody knows, that tourism and pilgrimages are really probably 80% of the income in these areas, at least 80% of families have at least one person that are in the tourism industry. We are beginning to go. I've spoken to many of my colleagues in the State Department here and travel companies that we use and trust, and security companies. And yes, they are beginning to go now. The idea is by August, September, the regular trips will begin again. I know that some people think that might be a little bit of wishful thinking, but I trust these people, and these people have been doing this over the years. They know when things go up and down. So definitely by November, it's going to be a good time to go, and I will be there. So you better make sure there's a room for me there tomorrow, because I'm going to be there. So, but if people were worried about that and wondering when it would be safe to go back, The skinny but on the street is that now it's beginning to get much better, and as you say, Tamar, more and more people are traveling, and more airlines are reopening those routes, and the State Department are lowering their threat levels. So.
Yes, it's very exciting. I will also be there. So if you want to meet all of us in person, we would love to see you in Jericho in November. I think it's going to be a really, really fantastic and powerful event. Tamar has been doing so much work on the back end, and November is also a beautiful time to be in Jericho, of all the times of the year. So highly recommend in that regard. I got a message from Mae that she'll be joining us in about 5 minutes, but if anyone has any initial questions, we could definitely take a question while we wait for her to load in. So feel free to put those in the Q&A if anyone has anything preliminarily they'd like to ask. And maybe something for you, Your Excellency. I wonder if you could tell us a little bit about how the Holy Land compared to the portions of the trip in Lebanon and Jordan, since Tamar wasn't there for those parts. Did you hear similar things from our Jordanian and Lebanese friends? What were the kind of ethos that you experienced on those portions of the trip?
You know, that is a good point, because all three were completely different. I'm very obviously more familiar with the Israel-Palestine, Jordan side of the equation. That's where I spend a lot of my time. This was only my second time in Lebanon, my first time in Beirut. In the Holy Land, as Palestine, Israel, the frustration was there, the sadness was there, and not a feeling of hopelessness, though, right? That people were still very, very positive, and wanted to work together. They wanted to sort this out. Jordan, our friends in Jordan, they wanted to support. Obviously, Jordan is affected by what's going on deeply. Obviously, a lot of family members, etc. But they didn't. They're not on the daily basis dealing with some of the issues that our colleagues are in Palestine and in Lebanon. In Beirut, it was again a much quieter time than it would usually be. But the sadness in Beirut is a little different. Our friends, our Lebanese friends, they have been affected, of course, because of the blocking of the bank accounts, because they're feeling that some monies could be going to groups that are supporting the war, which of course again affects more of the everyday person than anybody else. The rolling blackouts, the lack of internet connection. For instance, there are lots of websites that are now blocked completely in Lebanon. They just aren't allowed to be accessed. International websites aren't allowed to be accessed from Lebanon because of some of the blockades, some of the sanctions that have been put into place. And so the everyday person really is being affected, more so like Palestine. Going back to Jordan, I was extremely happy to hear the everyday people on the street in Jordan sharing stories of how they are trying to help their family members or their friends or people they went to college with, university with, or schools with. And so everybody is in it together. That was great, but they don't seem to be quite as affected by the everyday problems, food-wise, internet-wise, utility-wise. The wonderful university we went to in Lebanon, again, the children, that's going to be a common thing that you'll hear from me going forward, because that's one of my remits now. I've handed over the reins of the Eastern Lieutenancy, is the children. I notice our friends from Bethlehem University Foundation are on with us now, and obviously Bethlehem University in Palestine is suffering like everybody else over there, but those young adults are fabulous. I'm sure that they'll share some of those with you. But the Lebanese university has taken in a lot of Syrians, a lot of Palestinians are there too, and so the community. The community of the children, of the young adults, is great, and they really are just wanting to get on with life, but suffering. As I say, internet going out, no food, no power on both sides of the trip. Jordan, not so much. And of course, our Iraqi trip had to be postponed because there was some fighting exactly where we were going to go. I see Mae has joined us. How are you, Mae? I pass you back on to you guys.
Hello, hello. Great to see you, Mae. And perfect timing. So Reverend Dr. Cannon has joined us, and so I'll turn it over to her. And she does have a few images that I'm going to share on her behalf as she goes through her reflections on the trip. Let me share those now.
Well, thank you. And I'm so sorry. I was very eager to hear the things that Tamar and Vicki had to share about our time together. You know, we just did a trip debrief last week and couldn't believe how much time has passed since January. In some ways, it feels like yesterday, and in other ways, it feels like it was years ago. And I'm grateful that people are with us, you know, live, and for the people who will be watching this on video. I apologize, I wasn't able to join in the last 30 minutes or so. I was just meeting with a group of ambassadors here in DC and was giving them a briefing on what's been happening in the broader Middle East. And maybe this was shared already, but one of our key learnings was, you know, here in the United States, we've been talking about how escalations in Gaza, which have had such a devastating effect on the people there every single day. And, you know, we have to do everything we can to call for a comprehensive ceasefire. That's our number one ask right now. But one of the number one goals has also been preventing this from becoming a broader Middle East conflict. And one of our key learnings has been how this is already a broader Middle East conflict. And so I'll talk about that some. I did pull out a few pictures, and these may be a little bit out of order, but there were a few things I really wanted to highlight. And one of the things I wanted to highlight was the ways that this has already escalated to the West Bank. So any of you who've traveled in the occupied Palestinian territories, which includes East Jerusalem, it includes the West Bank, the occupation has looked in Gaza like a blockade for 16 years before October 7th. This is a picture of a village that is just south of Beit Sahor. And because, you know, Vicki just said we couldn't go to Iraq, several of us actually went back into Israel. And, you know, I had a Saturday afternoon off, and I was going to go visit some children who are very dear to my family from Jerusalem to Bethlehem, which, you know, depending on how you go, it might be 9 kilometers or 12 kilometers, which is like 6 to 8 miles or something like that. And I was astounded. It took me 2 hours to get from Jerusalem to Bethlehem. And the roads to many of the Palestinian villages and the Palestinian cities. So this is within the occupied Palestinian territories, major thoroughfares between Bethlehem and Beit Sahor, between, you know, different villages have been completely cut off. So if you've traveled in the OPT, you've seen these red signs. They say in Hebrew, Arabic, and English that you're entering into Area A. So if you're familiar, areas A, B, and C. Areas A are supposed to be under Palestinian civil and security control. And I went through a checkpoint that's the Beit Sahor checkpoint from Jerusalem into Beit Sahor, and was going to turn and do the roundabout, you know, to be able to go into Beit Sahor. And there were hundreds of cars that were just pulled over because that road had been blocked. And I called my friend and said, I don't know how to get in. And she said, well, go down to the next village. And this was the picture of the next village. And every village we went to maybe 4 or 5 villages on the road down to Hebron. And the entrances had been blocked and bulldozed like this. So you can see there's cinder blocks there. And we heard so many stories of Palestinians who it's dangerous to get out of your car in these kinds of situations. But some of the villages for weeks on end are blocked not only by the front entrance, but by the back entrance. We spent a couple of days traveling throughout the West Bank where we went to villages like Abud or Nabi Saleh, or we drove up to Nablus, where drives should take, 20 minutes to drive from Ramallah, to Nabi Saleh. And it literally took 2 hours because you can't go through front entrances. You had to go through back entrances. And one of the things that also happens is that the roads change. And so this lack of mobility has always been an issue in the occupied territories, but this degree of instability, this degree of control, this degree of closure, I, in my years of working in Palestine, had never seen anything like this. I've heard that it's gotten a bit better over the past several weeks, but there are articles about these closures. Nablus and Jenin, and the further away you get from Bethlehem and the further away you get from Ramallah, it gets worse and worse. And this is just something that we're not talking about here in the US nearly enough. And so I wanted to show this picture as an example of that. You can go to the next picture, Destiny. So on one hand, there were these things that I felt like, I'm paying attention to the facts and statistics, and we have no idea kind of what's happening. And on the other hand, any of you who have traveled, or who know the Palestinian people, what an incredibly hospitable place. And so, Tamar, I don't know if you talked about the event in Bethlehem, but this is a picture of many pastors and Christian leaders and the leadership of And Still We Rise, which is the program that Tamar leads of Palestinian women. And you can see Vicki and Tamar in there. And on the other hand, there is so much hope, and what I mean by that is that the people are so incredibly resilient. And this was one of the most ecumenical gatherings I've ever experienced. You can see a Franciscan, priest standing next to Bishop Azar, who's Lutheran, and a Catholic priest standing next to, or an Armenian priest standing next to Munter Itzhak, who's Lutheran, who's standing next to an Orthodox priest, who's standing next to, Zugbi, who leads a peace program, who's standing next to someone who's a professor at Bethlehem Bible College. And the way that the Christian community has not given up hope. We're going to have so many events that we invite you to be a part of as a part of Holy Week. And so one of the things that we are in partnership with our Palestinian brothers and sisters in doing is creating videos that we'll be releasing during Holy Week. We're partnering with Sabeel and Bethlehem Bible College and Christ at the Checkpoint to do almost reflections and stations of the cross that'll be focused on Gaza that we'll be releasing throughout Holy Week, leading up to a service on Holy Saturday, where we'll be able to worship in partnership with our brothers and sisters in Christ from the Holy Land, and to be able to be together and fellowship and have a meal together and pray together and to stand in solidarity, holding on to the horrors of this moment demand that we be mobilized and that we be active and that we call for peace. But that also this is not the end of the story, that we have a role to play as followers of Jesus in pursuing peace and in advocating for justice, but that we also are a part of the body of Christ and that we're united. And so the gift to be able to be together was just deeply, deeply encouraging in the midst of such horrible times. So a group of us are traveling back for Christ at the Checkpoint. If you have not seen yet, Munter Itzhak was supposed to be coming in April for our advocacy summit. He's not able to come. Jack Sarah is coming. Mitri Rahab is coming. Dawood Nasser is coming. A number of our friends are coming in April to us in Washington, D.C., but we're also going to be with them in May. And so we'd invite you to consider joining us in May to go and be with them as well. And then we'll be going in November. We have this incredible gathering that Tamar is leading with those group of women from And Still We Rise in Jericho in November, where we will be with And Still We Rise, that I'd invite you to consider joining us with as well. You can go to the next picture. So we met with Christian leaders throughout Palestine. Unfortunately, we did meet with some Jewish leaders. Many of our Jewish visits, I ended up doing before the delegation came. We had some scheduling challenges, but I met with a number of rabbis and a number of leaders in Israel. We also went to Amman, Jordan, and we met with political leaders. So we met with members of the royal palace. The gentleman there in the suit that is to my left is the deputy prime minister of Jordan. He is also the foreign minister of Jordan. His name is Safadi. If you read the news, you will hear he is very outspoken. You know, he has ardently been calling for the urgent need. The most urgent need right now is for a comprehensive ceasefire, for immediate and adequate humanitarian assistance into Gaza. And Safadi has been very outspoken in that regard. So we had a number of very high-level political meetings as well throughout our trip, with Arab political leaders. And I just wanted to show a picture of that so that you could see that was one of the aspects. Of course, the Palestinian Authority has shifted since then. The Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority and the cabinet of the PA resigned since we met with Shataya of the PA. We met with President Abbas. The reason for that is there is the thought to appoint a new government that could possibly be a government that might be a unity government that could act as an intermediary if there is a transition, or a permanent ceasefire related to Gaza on the horizon. But wanted to show you that we met with political actors as well. After Jordan, I think the next picture will probably be Lebanon. After Jordan, we went to Lebanon. And, one of the things that was so amazing is that we had meetings in Lebanon that were scheduled, but we also had these moments of just God being so incredibly present. And this picture was an example of that. Some of the leaders we were with, we traveled for 2.5 weeks, and we really wanted to try to be I was going to say obedient to the Holy Spirit, but we had some leaders say to us, you should just take a break. So there was one morning on the way to the airport in Lebanon where we went to, this is Harissa, on the top of a mountain in Lebanon. That's a statue of the Mother Mary. And we were going to just reflect and pray. And, you're overlooking the water in the city of Beirut. And I thought to myself, well, I'll just thank the Father. I thought he was this very humble. He was humble, but thought that this Catholic priest, I would just thank him for the space. It was so beautiful, and there was music playing, and it was very reflective. And I thanked this priest, and it ends up, he was so kind. He, of course, as Arab hospitality demands, he invited us in for coffee and tea, and it ends up, he's a famous actor in Lebanon, very, very renowned. And Vicki being so social and knowing so many people, discovered, and we found out that our dear friend, Bishop Mansour, who is a Maronite bishop that we know and that Vicki knows and I've sat on a board with, actually happened to be in Lebanon. And so this priest, we had this lovely coffee, and it was like this serendipitous meeting. And he said, well, have you met our patriarch? Well, the Maronites are one of the most influential Catholic groups in Lebanon. And it ends up that we found out our dear friend Gregory Mansour, a Maronite bishop, was in Lebanon at the same time. And we ended up meeting with the patriarch, who is the highest, Christian official in Lebanon as a result of this serendipitous meeting. And so we got hosted at what's the equivalent of the Holy See, in Beirut because of this meeting. And so we had these run-ins on the street where people recognized us, that were just kind of these meetings where it felt like God was literally paving a way. And so we were traveling in the Middle East in the middle of this horrific time. And yet we had these glimpses of, it felt like a path being made for us, where doors were opened and we were able to have really constructive conversations in the midst of this horrific time. Which feels like confirmation at times that God is going before us. And so that was certainly an encouragement. And I think there might be just one or two more pictures. Another a time that was just so encouraging. You may be familiar, the Armenian population in Beirut is quite significant. This is Hagazian University. Hagazian University is an Armenian university. It's one of the places where you see pluralism in the Middle East, Muslim students and Armenian students and Christian students in Beirut. This is a meeting with their president, Paul Hadostian, who is an Armenian Christian who just the September before, I've known him for years, but I had run into him in Yerevan in Armenia. And he had us meet with some of his board and later meet with some of his students. And so when I said we had meetings with, politicians and church leaders, we spent a half a day at the school and got to meet with some of the students. And it was a time where you saw hope in the youth of the Middle East. And that was a very encouraging day in the midst of a trip where there was so much that was not encouraging. I think the next picture might be a picture of the Middle East Council of Churches. And I just was telling the ambassadors I was meeting with this morning that it actually was quite fun. We had some relationships, with the Middle East Council of Churches, but also with Christian leaders who did not know each other in Lebanon. And so we had a gathering of Christian leaders, and it was fun to see leaders who did not know each other in Beirut. And so we got to sit around a table with them. Some of the leaders who were present in this meeting through translation, because some of them did not speak English, actually told about how they were the pastors of congregations in South Lebanon. And so you might have heard about how in Israel, populations near the border of the communities near Gaza have been displaced since October 7th. More than 100,000 people on the north border of Israel. There have been, of course, hostilities between Hezbollah in South Lebanon and the Israeli army in North Israel. There have been hostilities since early October. And so 100,000 people or more in Israel have been displaced for the last 5+ months. And we didn't really know until we were here that an equal number have been displaced from South Lebanon. And so we heard from pastors who were telling about entire communities that are Christian communities have been completely displaced. And it's important to remember that these are the same communities that have been displaced since, in the 2006 war. In the 2006 war, more than 1 million Lebanese were displaced as well. And another dynamic that was present in Lebanon that's important to understand is that the Lebanese have a little bit different of a relationship with the Palestinians. In the 70s and the 80s and before Arafat shifted his strategy, and before certainly the Oslo peace agreement, the Lebanese and the Palestinians had a contentious relationship. I mean, many blame the Palestinians in some way, shape, or form for contributing to the Lebanese civil war. And so I think that's an important dynamic to understand as well. I think that's the last of the pictures. Is that right? So just to close, I think, and I'm sure Vicki and Tamar shared this as well. We were so grateful to have the opportunity to go, to be able to stand in solidarity with our Christian partners and brothers and sisters. Our primary goal at this moment is to stop the massive numbers of deaths. The statistics show that in Gaza, a person is being killed almost 1 every 8 minutes. And so our top priority is calling for a comprehensive ceasefire, which we believe is in the best interest of all, but we have to stop, the ethnic cleansing and prevent further genocide from happening in Gaza, and that we want to work for immediate and adequate humanitarian assistance into Gaza, and, working towards a long-standing comprehensive peace agreement while addressing the core causes that we've been working on, which include the ongoing occupation of the Palestinian people and addressing these broader issues, in the Middle East. So we can certainly talk in terms of question and answer. I think we'll be shifting to that. And I'm so sorry, Vicki and Tamar, that I missed your updates. I'll have to go back and watch them on video, but I'm grateful I was able to join you.
Thanks so much, May. And yeah, so please put your questions in the chat or use the Q&A feature. I see we have one, which May you touched on, but Lydia asks, will CMEP be in Palestine again in May for Christ at the Checkpoint? And if so, what role are we going to be playing in that?
Yes, we will be there. We've not formed a formal trip because we haven't had enough interest. If there were, I would say we'd need like half a dozen or more that would have to say, yes, we'd like to go. So I would say right now we're kind of at the stage of, if you're interested in traveling with us, send us an email at info@cmep.org. Right now, you could register online directly at Christ at the Checkpoint. If there were 6 or more, we would put together a formal trip, where we would help coordinate. You'd buy your own tickets, but then we could, set up, a direct, a more formal trip. Right now, I would say you're more than welcome to meet us there. A number of leaders from CMEP will be present in May at Christ at the Checkpoint. We might be speaking, I know we'll be engaged. We've been having meetings with Munther Itzhak and others, but we will be there for sure.
Yes, and before you joined, we also had Tamar say a word about And Still We Rise and invite folks to consider joining us in November in Jericho as well. So it would be lovely to get people mobilized to travel to the Holy Land. But yeah, what other questions do you all have? Oh, I see another one come up in the Q&A. Lisa asks, what can we in local churches do to assist the Palestinians on this end? So here in the U.S. Tamar, do you want to take this one?
Let me just share something that some of our churches are doing, and that is adopting a parish or adopting a church. So, and it doesn't have to be Catholics and Catholics and Lutherans, meaning that just kind of praying for them. Obviously, there is a need, a financial need, but it's sometimes very difficult to make sure money goes to the right places. And Tamar is going to be able to assist in telling you how you can help with that. But we have started. I know actually my executive priest secretary, his church down in New Jersey, Hampton, New Jersey, his kids going through First Communion and confirmation, they have started a pen pal writing with a parish school over in actually in Jordan. And this sounds like a very simple thing and not that much good, but you cannot believe the joy that it brings the priest, just to have a brother priest to speak to, or family members to talk to people. So that's a simple thing to do. But yes, financially, there are a lot of children that who rely on their parents, the tourism aspect, that they're not bringing in any income at all. So financial help is definitely. I know that there were a couple of students at Bethlehem University who are good friends of mine. Their families are good friends with mine, and they just did not have the money to pay the next semester. So we jumped in and helped. So there is a financial need, but also a spiritual need. Just by that's what I would suggest. Maybe reaching out and adopting your church, adopting a sister church over there. But Tamar, you know more on the ground from over there.
Yes, thank you, Vicki. Well, I personally think there's a lot that can be done, and every church in the US and even outside the US plays a major role in helping. I mean, I've seen a lot of prayer vigils in the US. I think these are popular and they can make a difference. I've seen protests like Don't Stop Protesting. On a personal level, not necessarily in churches, but just like sharing the Palestinian voice, like you're hearing from us, but it doesn't stop there. It's what you say about it. It's very influential as well. I'd say for financial, there's a lot of organizations, and I don't know if Destiny you can find it, but we do have a list of organizations that need financial assistance. I don't know if you can share it or find it somewhere, but there's a list on the CMEP website that has all the organizations that we're involved with that do require financial assistance. But also on Capitol Hill, I've seen a lot of church organizations that go and advocate, and Churches for Middle East Peace is one of them, where they bring in like Palestinian speakers or just a delegation of Palestinians to speak there. But you don't have to be Palestinian to do that. Like it's just going on Capitol Hill, talking to staffers there is also very, very influential.
Thank you so much to both of you. And I'll also add a couple of opportunities. One is CMEP has been a lead organizer in the Global Gaza Ceasefire Pilgrimage Movement. I put the link in the chat just a second ago, but we're organizing marches really across the world. CMEP will be hosting one in Washington, D.C. this weekend, but the fundraising from these marches are going to support folks in Gaza, as well as refugees from the Gaza Strip and broader Palestine, and also to CMEP's educational programming for the US and North American marches. And then secondarily, I also encourage you, if you are a lay leader or clergy in a church, CMEP does have a formal church partnership opportunity that is great. I lead our church partnerships movements, and I would love for you to reach out to me if you're interested in seeing if it would be a good fit for your community. We have a number of curriculum resources, liturgical resources, and often will actually travel to see our church partners and offer CMEP events along the way. So if you're interested, I'll put my email also in the chat and would love to talk to you about church partnership. And next, Andrea asks, is there communication with Palestinians in Rafah, or is it a dead zone?
I can speak to that, and then Tamar, I don't know if you or Vicki have. So I think it depends on a couple of things. We're in touch. I'm in touch with Gaza almost daily, and the people I'm in touch with are in Khan Yunis, and some of them are in Rafah, but it depends on the type of communication they have. So some of the development workers have Israeli SIM cards. And so I'm able to keep in touch with them when there are sometimes there's communication blackouts in Gaza. And so if they have Israeli SIM cards, you can keep in touch. And when they don't, you can't. I mean, if they don't have Israeli SIM cards, you can't keep in touch. And so there is communication, but it goes out quite frequently. And so I would say it's incremental. And so that can be quite difficult. But we are getting news in terms of what's happening there.
Yeah, I would say the same, May. We are, one of my other hats, for those who don't know, is that I'm very involved with landmine clearance and the Halo Trust. And so we have a lot of friends in the security industry as well. And we're getting information out, but mainly a lot of it's delayed by the time they actually manage to give it to us, because as you say, there are some dead zones. We have one particular church, actually it's a Catholic church and a Greek church. They're working together, and they do between them. We do have daily communication with them. I think they've got many different SIM cards, and if one's not working, they'll use a different one or a different one. And so we're getting information out, but we still that needs to be improved. That absolutely needs to be improved. I think the West really needs to have a more hands-on idea of what's going on there, on an up-to-date, sort of timeline, so we can help where it's needed.
Justin, if you'd let me answer just that one question, what keeps us going? Honestly, like just having you hear about it and do what you do, and just like seeing what is happening in the States and seeing all the people in the world just doing everything they can do to stop this. So whatever you're doing, it really does affect us, and it gives us hope, and it keeps us going. So thank you for everything that you have been doing.
Yeah, and May or Vicki, do either of you, what's keeping you going in the midst of this really, really long and difficult period of our work?
The fact that our brothers and sisters in the Holy Land need us to, and so if we can't do this now, then we're here, we're warm, we're eating, and there are people in 2024 that are starving. I mean, there are many people starving, but this is happening, and this is a man-made situation, and that keeps, I guess, I don't want to say anger, but the need to change this, the determination. We need to do something, because if we don't, who's going to?
Yeah, I think that's right. I've been saying the last few years, despair is the luxury of the privileged. And it's hard not to despair, because it feels like sometimes I get so sick of hearing myself speak. I'm doing these daily videos and I'm like, oh my goodness, there I go again. And but we've been having these phone calls, and Tamar's on them with our Palestinian friends, and they said, you Americans, you celebrate Easter, and it's all about celebration. It's all about celebration. And I can't remember who it was, Tamar, who said, like, Easter and resurrection is about, like, hope in the midst of moments like these, about Jesus being triumphant in the midst of moments when the world is so incredibly broken. Right? Like, that's the hope that we profess. Like, this is when we most need Jesus. Like, this is the moment when, like, do we believe what we say do we believe what we say we believe? Like, do we really believe? Like, our motto is peace is possible. Like, and do we believe it? And so, and I do. I fundamentally do. And so, like, this is where our faith is put to the test. This is where, if it's 100 days, and heaven forbid, however many more it is, and I think that's where, Tamar, you said, like, it gives us hope. Like, when we're on our weekly prayer calls and there are people, sometimes it's one person with the sign out there that's saying, like, ceasefire now. It's the one person out there on a Gaza ceasefire pilgrimage. It's the one person in Antarctica that gives us 7 continents. like that's part of what, together, like we will continue until all the bombs stop dropping, and like we will continue until there's a comprehensive ceasefire, and until the occupation is brought to an end, and hopefully, God willing, it will be in our lifetime, right? And like, I think that's what this work is about. And so and then there are these moments, and I think this is really important for me to hear, but for all of us to hear. One of my dear friends just had a baby, and he keeps posting pictures of this little baby laughing, and he says, like, this is a sign of God breaking through in the world, right? And I'm here in DC, and there are all these cherry blossoms blooming, and there are verses that talk about creation crying out about the goodness of God. Like, God is still good when the world is so incredibly broken, and so it's okay for us to still experience joy. And look at these Palestinians in Gaza, who, in the midst of, like, hunger and deprivation, are still, like, opening a food kitchen and serving, each other with, like, lemon and grass. I mean, it's one of the most beautiful signs of, like, the glory of humanity and God being reflected in it. Like, hospitality in the midst of nothing. Like, God be praised. Like, those are the things that give me hope. And so if they can, dance dupka in the midst of rubble, like, that gives me hope. That gives me hope.
Well, I think that's a really beautiful note to end on, and it reminds me very much of our Lenten devotional theme this year, which is Faithful Resilience, a Lenten Sojourn for Peace. I just put the link in the chat. A lot of those reflections are really, really beautiful from folks and clergy in our networks. I want to give one last opportunity if any of our 3 panelists have any closing remarks or thoughts that they'd like to share before we end. Any last words?
My last word is always, especially during this time of Lent, is that it takes a little bit of time just to add one more prayer, Hail Mary, Our Father, whichever one is your favorite. Just add it on a daily basis, just for the people in Gaza, because let's just, as well as bombarding our politicians with notes, let's bombard our Lord with prayers for our friends.
Thanks so much, everyone. I'll close, I think, today actually with this verse that inspired our Lenten devotional series from Hebrews 1 and 2. I think it's appropriate now, that says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and the sin that clings so closely, and let us run with perseverance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith, who for the sake of the joy that was set before him endured the cross, disregarding its shame, and has taken his seat at the right hand of the throne of God." Let this be a blessing to us as we embark nearly on Holy Week and our Orthodox siblings who are just beginning the Lenten period. May we be witnesses, advocates, and continue to speak out for Jesus and for peace. Thank you all for being with us today. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.